Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 46 of the Great Canadian Hockey Podcast. I'm James Parisi. I'm here with my co-host Aiden Sarah, who has dubbed this the Nicholas Jensen episode. For anyone who isn't a deep-cutting hockey nerd, that was the Canucks' first rounder in 2011, who amounted to not so much. But yeah, welcome to the Nicholas Jensen episode. Hopefully, this episode is more entertaining and interesting than his career. Already taking shots at a pro hockey player. Great start, James. How are we doing, Aiden? What's going on, fella?
Good. I think our friend of the podcast, Charlie Black, who was on with me for episode 44, will be very proud that his naming the podcast after a player who wore that number has lasted at least two episodes past him starting it. I'll see how long this goes for. Next one will be the Sven Berchi episode. I already know, so it'll be at least 4-7.
This
I'm
isn't a Canucks podcast, so I may have to argue some of them.
well, Berchi on the Flames then.
Okay, okay, fair.
Yeah, I'm good, James. The junior hockey playoffs in Alberta, the HJHL is the junior B league out here. I've been doing a lot of play-by-play in it. You know what I'll say about that league, James?
What would you say about that league?
Immaculate vibes, I think is the best way I can put it. Like everybody's stoked to be there. Everybody's just there because they love playing hockey. Like like you don't get the egos at high level that you often do. It's just everybody's a bunch of buddies and they're just there to rip it up and like they're really happy to be there and everything and it's a fun game, right? Like there's not as much structure, there's not as much, heavy systems being played, and that makes it hard as a play-by-play guy to read the play sometimes. But you get a game like I had last night that was just like unbelievable, back and forth, huge saves. There was like seven breakaways, another 10 2-on-1s, and did 2-1 in double overtime. Like it was it was a lot of fun. It was one of the best games I've done in a while. Um yeah, yeah, it was cool. How are
Since you've
you?
been most recently been working junior A, do you see guys who should very clearly be playing junior A?
Yeah, definitely. Like the high end talent in that league can and should definitely be junior A players, and some of them definitely will too. Um and like I can again, I've been around hockey long enough to look at a guy and be like, wow, he's a very skilled player. And by the second or third time I'm watching him, I'm like, okay, well, that's probably why he's not in junior A yet. But you know what? He's an '06. He will be, right? Like it's been a lot of fun. How are you?
Me, I am back in BC after my month and a half in Alberta, and I couldn't be happier. I'm not in negative temperatures right now. I was overjoyed to see that it was 3 degrees after the sun had gone down yesterday when I got back. And man, I don't know if anyone else has had some crazy travel stories, but I had a dozen flight delays and two cancellations and my luggage got lost over 48 hours of me trying to get from Fort McMurray to Vancouver. Um, what a trek. That was wild. That was something. I've never experienced anything like that. I mean, I know I haven't flown a lot, but dude, like just disappointment after disappointment. There's only so many times you can enjoy a nice chilly one at an airport bar and have a meal at an airport before you're just kind of over it. But I managed to stay positive the whole time. And I don't know if that helped, but everyone always dunks on WestJet, and maybe I should be right now too because of how many times I was canceled or delayed and how often I was kind of in the dark. But their customer service people, like their like flight agents at the front at check-in, I'd go back and talk to them after every delay or cancellation, and they're like flip-flopping me through flights. They've got like all of the balls in the air. It was like they've assembled all of the Infinity Stones and they're trying to formulate their plan of how to get me to Vancouver. It was wild how much they just wanted to help me get home. And I don't know, like I don't really get hot, get pissed off or anything like that, and I definitely don't treat customer service people poorly even when I'm ticked off. But and I know they had been dealing with a lot of those kinds of people, But so I wonder if maybe me treating them well helped. But man, that was crazy. That was just a wild sequence of airport events, and I hope no one else traveling over the past weekend had to do that because I definitely would have been home a day and a half earlier and maybe able to enjoy the weekend back in Vancouver, but no matter. I'm back home with my cats, back in BC, ready to see some friends again. And yeah, things are looking pretty solid, I'd say.
I'm still in Alberta, obviously, but
My
hopefully,
condolences for your Alberta-ness.
yeah, hopefully I'm back home sooner than later. Speaking of back home, speaking of the Canucks, James, it's done, man. It's done. It's over. The Elias Pettersson drama has ended, and it had to be a apparently very serious Carolina Hurricanes trade offer that pushed the needle in Pettersson's camp to being like, okay, we're just gonna get this done. 8 years, $11.6 million. Pettersson, Miller, and Hughes are now locked down for the next 3 years at under 28 million bucks, which is pretty unreal for what those guys are bringing to the team right now. What do you think of the contract?
I think it's a really good deal. Like you look at the cap going up over the next few years, that 11.6 very easily could have been a 12.5. Like I thought they did really well. And then clearly Pedersen actually wants to be in Vancouver if he signed for that price. Like I don't know what his camp came in wanting originally. I imagine like you start high, right? Like you probably start at like 13 and work your way down. And because you probably come in with the argument going, well, the cap's going up, pay me. This is what percentage this would be now. This is what percentage of the cap this is in 2 years, 3 years. Yeah, I thought they did incredibly well. And for Canucks fans, there's no more panic, no more worry on that front. But I mean, on the other side, you mentioned the Hurricanes offer. I just want to know what that is. All we know is that it wasn't Aho. So what the hell was it? Was it Svechnikov?
I think it was Natchez and Kokoniemi.
Okay.
Yeah, that obviously would have been the base, and you would have had to add assets to that. When I heard they were talking to Carolina, I said Sebastian Aho and Alexander Nikishin, and it's done. That's all. Period.
Okay.
Um,
I mean, yeah, fair. But like on my end, like I feel like okay, Natchez you get your can be a point per game player in the right situation. Kokaniemi's come a long way into being like the 3C you always dream of that is capable of doing whatever you need him to do and can step up in the lineup if necessary. That's awesome. That's great. You would love to have that. But then the Canucks aren't going to want draft picks. They're trying to win. So what's the plus plus? I don't know. It that kind of throws me off.
and you know what? Maybe if Jim Rutherford writes a book at the end of his career, he'll have like this story about the Pedersen negotiation in there. But I don't think we're going to know any more details short of something like that happening. So, yeah, for Canucks fans, having this done is good. And, Vancouver's play and Pedersen's play looked like it was sliding a little bit. So I think for Vancouver, the distraction of this being gone, both internally in the room to everybody and then specifically to Pedersen, is a good thing. This is coming out on a Tuesday. We're recording this on a Monday. And on this week's Friday, James, it is the NHL trade deadline. Chris Tanev is a Dallas Star. Aside from that, not a lot in the lead up. Does that mean we're going to be in for a very extravagant trade deadline Friday? Or does that mean that because of the cap space restrictions that every single NHL team seems to have, that just aren't going to be as possible this year? What do you think?
Well, I mean, Lindholm's off the board, so that's done. And then Monahan's off the board. There you go, that's done. So, I mean, next up we've got Noah Hannafin, who seems like he's going to be dealt and it's going to be like immediately sign a massive extension. And as it's been reported, I believe Tampa Bay, Boston, and Florida are the preferred destinations. And then Jake Gensel, who Elliot said on his most recent episode of 32 Thoughts that it is 95%. He's heard people say 95% going to happen. I'm paraphrasing there, but that's what he's been told from his sources or something like that. So that's interesting. The Gensel thing will probably happen, and that's really enticing because that's a surefire first line winger, difference maker, X factor type player that is most likely on the move. And there are no shortage of suitors. So that's interesting. But the thing I always wonder is what are the off the board moves going to be? There's always one or two moves every deadline where there's a player that has a few years left on his deal or wasn't rumored to get moved. And next thing you know, they're gone. And it's usually for a pretty decent package. One of the ones I always go back to was the deal that sent Anthony Mantha to Washington.
Yeah,
That one came out of
Verana.
nowhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the time, Mantha was looked at as a guy who could be a major X Factor player. And that obviously didn't end up happening, but yeah, that one came out of nowhere. So I wonder what that move's going to be like, but I do think it's going to end up being a really busy trade deadline. I think there's going to be a lot of small moves, a lot of depth players moved because for one, there are so many teams in the hunt, right? Like, yes, you look at our standings, and as you and I talked about before we started recording, the 16 teams currently in the playoff position very well could be these 16 teams, but there's probably three or four teams on the outside looking in that would love to add something and try and get in because you know how it works. You just got to get in the dance. Sometimes it's all it takes. So, you get in the dance, you go for a long run, and on your players get experience, you have a chance of playing for the cup, and your franchise is pulling in a ton more money on the revenue side because you are filling the arena that many more times with pricier tickets. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty loaded trade deadline, but I think on the other end of things, with that many teams in contention, there are that many fewer teams that are selling. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen. And I think probably some of the only locks off the top of my head that could get moved are Alex Venberg in Seattle. He was a healthy scratch tonight for trade related reasons. I think Hannafin is a lock. Um, I think Adam Henrique's a lock. I don't really know who else is. I think there's a lot of players that could, but yeah.
I think Frank Vetrano is going to get moved. I think Pat Verbeek is smart enough to know that this is probably the highest his value is going to be. And if you look at that Anaheim Ducks young core, Frank Vetrano will likely not be in his prime when they're competitive. So it doesn't make too much sense to retain him for the Anaheim Ducks' competitive window, which, you can see it down the road. It's not too far away, but it's far enough away that moving Vetrano for futures seems like a no-brainer to me. So I'd add Vetrano to that list of guys I'd be shocked if they didn't get traded. Chris Tanev would have been on that list. We glazed over the fact that he did get traded, but he is now a member of the Dallas Stars, James, which honestly, like, I'm not saying this makes Dallas my pick to get out of the Central, but Dallas is my pick to get out of the Central. Like, and bolstering the defense just totally helps that. The trade, very simply, was Chris Tanev. Sorry, the trade wasn't very simple because there needed to be double retention for Dallas to afford Tanev's contract. But the trade, ostensibly, between Dallas and Calgary, Dallas gets Tanev. The Calgary Flames acquire a second round draft choice. Now, Calgary, for a while, was pretty insistent that they wanted a first rounder for him. That didn't end up being the case, but they go second rounder and they get Artem Grushnikov from Dallas. He was their 48th overall pick in 2021 44 games with Texas this season, had a goal and 5 points. He's already played two with the Calgary Wranglers. This is a guy, James, that it's hard to really know what they have, in my opinion, because his game is so raw. But I do think at best you have maybe not somebody who's going to be quite as good as Chris Tanev was, but that type of defenseman, like the 5'4", 5'6" area shutdown guy who can throw hits and block shots, like the kind of guy who maybe gets, overlooked when you're talking about the best of somebody's prospect pool, but who everybody really wants to have on their team.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And I mean, after Calgary trades Zadorov as well, like that's something they want to replenish. And yeah, I mean, Calgary not getting a first rounder in this one, it's kind of tough because the D market's pretty thin. But I don't know. Like there's rumors swirling around out there that Tanev with his 10 team no trade list was able to nix a couple moves and Dallas was really the only way it was going to work out or one of them. But yeah, I mean, I don't think they did bad. Like, do you think there's reason for all of these people to be really dunking on them online about it?
No, especially because this draft, and I've said this on this podcast before, like to me, I was very happy Vancouver utilized their first round pick this year because when I look at the draft class, I actually see the players split coming around that 16 to 20 mark, which means if you're not in the playoffs, I have a lot of faith you're going to get a strong first round draft pick. But after the first, 16 to 20 players in this year's draft, it thins out a little bit, right? You're not getting the same guys in the 16 to 32 range in the first round this year that you got last year. It's just not that strong of a draft. So, you get a guy in Grushnikov where you know more what you're getting. You get Dallas a second round pick, which is going to be a late second rounder. I'm taking ostensibly you're taking two second rounders or one late first rounder in a draft where the end of the first round isn't supposed to be very strong, right? So I think everybody's reaction to it, this like, oh my God, that Calgary didn't get a first rounder for Tanev. That's terrible. Okay, but if you actually take a step back and you look at what they took versus what they would have had in Dallas's first rounder, Dallas could easily win the Stanley Cup this year. So they basically, they would have had the 32nd overall pick instead of the 64th overall pick, and then they wouldn't have got a former second round prospect as well. So I don't think Calgary failed at this trade. I think at the end of the day, they got asses for somebody who was definitely walking, somebody whose no trade list seemed like was causing them some problems. And they get futures, which is what Calgary should be doing right now. They should be moving their current strong players with value for futures because I think that's where they are as an organization right now. It's time to look ahead to the future because this core is not going to win.
You know, I agree with everything you just said, but there's one thing I caught. You've used the word ostensibly twice since we started this podcast, like this specific episode, and it's a word I've never heard you say before. So, like, is this your word of the day?
That's bizarre. It's bizarre that you haven't heard me say that because it's definitely not new. It's a very frequent part of my vocabulary when it's applicable. I think I'm using it in applicable situations.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it's one of those ones that just jumped out at me for some reason.
yeah, there are times where like I'll hear a word and I'm like, that's an excellent use of that, and then I'll use it for a week, but I don't think that's the case. I ostensibly is a frequent that's a frequent one for me, I think.
Okay, okay. And then the other thing that I keep picking up on here is you said Dallas is my pick to get out of the Central. And then you go, Dallas should easily get out of the Central. And then you went, Dallas could easily win a cup this year. I'm sensing some disrespect to Winnipeg and Colorado right now.
Yeah, I
Disrespect.
don't I don't know if I said they should easily get out of the Central. If I did, I definitely didn't mean that. They, to me, are my pick as of right now to get out. I think any three of Winnipeg, Colorado, Dallas could get out. I probably have Dallas, Colorado, Winnipeg in that order in terms of likelihood. Um, but you know what? Even if it's a second round loss, okay, well, you don't have a 24th overall pick and a not very strong draft then, right? And or at least a not very strong end of first round because I do like the top end of this draft. There's a lot of players I'm big fans of. Um, so today you touched on it. Alexander Wenberg, healthy scratch for trade related reasons. So as we record this Monday night, we don't know what those trade related reasons are. Perhaps it has been done by the time this episode releases on Tuesday. The other thing that happened on Monday, March the 4th, the New Jersey Devils have fired head coach Lindy Ruff. Wow, James, this guy in the last 2 years in New Jersey went from the fans chanting "Fire Lindy" at him at the start of last year, the fans all apologizing to him because of the way New Jersey finished last season, and then this season, which has just been a barrage of terrible injuries and terrible goaltending befalling the New Jersey Devils. And Lindy Ruff's officially done. I think the New Jersey Devils are also done in terms of competing for a playoff spot this year. I'm not saying they should be deadline sellers because I think this is a good enough group. And, you got young guys like obviously Jack Hughes, but even on the back end, Luke Hughes and Simon Nemec and Dawson Mercer up front. Like there's enough young talent on this team where you can totally have faith that they're going to take the step forward next season that they should have taken this season again if they can stay healthy and have consistent goaltending. But they decided it's not going to be with Lindy Ruff. Was this overdue?
I think if you were gonna do this, you had to do it about 20 games ago. It feels like too little, too late to make this change. And I mean, they just promoted Travis Green from assistant coach to interim head coach. So, I mean, clearly they feel comfortable with Travis Green if that's the case. He must have had a big role in coaching with the team. I mean, a lot of assistant coaches do. Sometimes it's not that way though. So I'm curious to see how the room reacts. Very often the first game after a coach is fired, the team will either have a blowout win or a very tight loss. That's usually like within one goal kind of loss. So I don't know. You got to wait a few games to see what this is really doing to the team. But they're what 7, 8 points out of playoffs right now, something like that. And I don't know. You've got the Tampa Bay Lightning and Detroit Red Wings there. Detroit's playing very safe hockey, and Tampa is Tampa. They've got a stellar roster, and Nikita Kucherov is having a season for the ages. So, I mean, are you really going to catch up and get back in that spot? The Flyers could fall off. That's something. There could be a spot there, but yeah, I don't really know, man. It doesn't really feel like it's going to make that much of a difference for their season. I think like it could have been a respect for Lindy Ruff kind of thing. It could have been you don't want to see this, quite frankly, legend of a coach just get fire Lindy chance over and over again. He doesn't deserve that. This team's been barraged by injuries. Players have underperformed. Players have been playing higher in their roles than they're supposed to be. I don't think he's deserved this. So it could be a respect thing. And that's kind of what I hope it is. But yeah, too little, too late. I arrived there.
Yeah, I don't think that's incorrect. The other player that I think we didn't talk about when we were chatting trade deadline pieces that I think is worth mentioning. Nashville's still right in that playoff hunt. They have the last wild card spot in the Western Conference right now. And like you said, like it's very likely the 16 teams that are in a playoff spot right now in both conferences end the season as your playoff teams. Yusei Saros of the Nashville Predators has been linked with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't see that happening. I don't see Toronto giving up nearly the kind of package that Nashville would want for him. They seem pretty protective of their young good players, and at some point Nick Robertson in a second, as every mock trade I see Leafs fans make doesn't just get you anybody you want. Sorry, Leafs fans. Um, but I wanted to mention Saros not just because his name is going to be an interesting one to watch, but because New Jersey was in the goalie market. It was Jacob Markstrom, didn't seem to work out. The Edmonton Oilers are the other team I wanted to touch on in the goaltending market. Stuart Skinner, James, I think, is their starter. I don't see them getting another starting goalie at the deadline here to put in front of Skinner. Do you go out and try and get a backup goaltender so that if Skinner falters, it's not Jack Campbell coming from the AHL or Calvin Pickard? Like, I don't think it's going to be Marc-Andre Fleury, but think something in that vein of Edmonton getting another goalie as a 1B contingency plan in the playoffs. What do you think of that?
Um, I mean, Martin Jones is really the only other name that floats to mind if Toronto wants to make up a roster spot, but I don't really think Edmonton spends their little bit of cap dollars on a goalie.
The
I don't really
Oilers,
think they go that route.
they've been one of the teams very in on Gensel, apparently.
Yeah.
Again, it's kind of funny. Like Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Vancouver to me are three very, very similar teams where I think their forward cores are excellent. I think their defense is, uh, in Winnipeg and Vancouver's case, I think their defense is a little bit underrated, but all three defenses could use some help. Winnipeg and Vancouver have elite goaltenders, Edmonton, not the case. But it's funny that most of the trades I've heard involving any of those three teams have been for forwards and not defensemen. And maybe that's because the defense market isn't really uh, that plentiful this season. But I think about the Edmonton Oilers. I think about Stuart Skinner. I think about potentially them having Jake Gensel. And I ask myself, like, would a number four defenseman not be a much more pressing need for Edmonton, right? Like you've got Darnell Nurse, who is, like you're gonna have to pay him $9.5 million till that terrible contract is over. He's not having a great season. He's not playing his worst hockey, but he's not been phenomenal. Evan Bouchard's playing very well. Uh, Matthias Ekholm continues to, very much live up to the big trade package they sent to Nashville last year for him. Don't you want another one?
Brett Kulak's not bad.
I like Kulak as a number five, totally.
Yeah.
But I look at Kulak and CC as the bottom pair. And I think even if we're going to give Darnell Nurse the benefit of a doubt and call him a top four defenseman, I still think they need one more to make up four top four defensemen in my head. I don't think Vincent Desharnais is the guy. That's the sixth that's playing with that group. And I don't see that.
Yeah, I'd rather spend money on a D if I'm them. I'd much rather grab another defenseman than a goalie. Like I just don't really know who's available that they can go for that they can just plug and play. That's the thing. There was Elliot reported that Edmonton was in on Tanev and the deal involved a first rounder, but Calgary also would have to take a specific player from their roster. You just gotta wonder if that was Jack Campbell.
It would make sense as to why Calgary said no if it was Jack Campbell, without a doubt. I
Yeah.
wonder about Jacob Chikrin.
I also okay, the thing with Chychrun for me is, are we just talking about him because he's the kind of player that teams would covet and because Ottawa's bad? Is this or is he actually available?
Well, my thinking behind Chikrin is that he is 25 years old. He's making a very decent $4.6 million this year and next year. And he in Ottawa is stuck on the left side behind two players. He's their third left-handed defenseman. I think there is very little chance he resigns in Ottawa, both for that reason and because I don't really see them giving him the money that it will take for him to stay in unrestricted free agency. So I think for Ottawa, it makes sense to trade him now. You can, like at the end of the day, you only gave up a first, a second, and it was a first and 2 seconds, I believe, to get him in the first place, which wasn't a huge amount for how good this guy really is. Um, yeah, James, I think it makes all the sense in the world that he he should be looking for a new home.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree, but until people stop talking about him for a year, I won't. He's reminding me of Dougie Hamilton. How Dougie Hamilton was supposedly just always on the move. And I mean, he got traded a few times. So like it traded a couple times, signed elsewhere. Like when there was smoke, there was fire. But it just reminds me of that situation where we're just always talking about how he might be available, how someone might be able to get him. And then I remember some analyst saying, some insider saying that it's not because he's a bad guy. It's not because teams don't want him. It's because teams want him. He is someone that people want on their roster. So that's why we're always talking about this. That's why he always might be available because someone's always asking. And if someone's always asking and the right offer comes along, I mean, technically, if the right offer comes along, almost anyone's on the market. So that just is where I'm left wondering, is he actually on the market or are they just listening for the sake of listening?
Yeah, it's not a bad, yeah, it's not a bad thought. Like that makes a lot of sense. I get it. Um, Edmonton also, like you said, cap hit problems, $4.6 million. That's not terrible. You half it, it's 2.3. You half it again. All of a sudden, you're getting Jacob Chikrin. If you can find a team to retain the extra 25%, you're getting Jacob Chikrin for $1.15 million. Now, that's a lot harder when there's term. It's a lot
Yeah.
easier to do that with a pending UFA, but the term is only 1 year. Do Ottawa need $2.3 million worth of cap space next year? I don't think they'd have too much of a problem retaining on Chikrin. Does Arizona need $1.15 million of cap space next year? No. So if you need to give up a third round pick to make that happen, you can. The longer this goes on, the more I think Chikrin's more Edmonton's guy than Gensel in terms of what they need. But who knows what Ken Holland's going to do? Um, Kind of outside of transactional news, there was two other things that happened in the last little while that are definitely worth mentioning. A couple really cool, and got to give both the Chicago Blackhawks and the Calgary Flames organizations a huge amount of credit. Chris Chelios had his number retired by Chicago. Not only was the ceremony really well done, and as somebody myself who was employed for a long time making videos and graphics for in-house jumbotron production of hockey games. Chicago's media team did a great job with their Chris Chelios tribute video. Um, I really liked Calgary's ceremony for Mika Kiprusoff as well. It's funny that the Chelios game against Detroit had an exciting ending where Patrick Kane scored in overtime, and then number 34 Mika Kiprusoff's game ended in a 4-3 Flames win too, which I thought was cool. Just wanted to both, obviously great careers for both players. They both deserve their jerseys up in the rafters, and both organizations did a very good job at honoring them. And then the other thing, James, we have a few milestones in the league this year. Nikita Kucherov had hit 100 points previously. Nathan MacKinnon had hit 100 points previously, and Austin Matthews had hit 50 goals previously, but they all do it again this season. It's MacKinnon's second 100-point season in as many years, James. That's awesome.
You'd love
MacKinnon,
to see it after years of where he would get 99 points.
yeah, like what? There was, I believe, a 97 and a 99.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, McKinnon and Kucherov both tied at 105 right now. McDavid will be next, probably as soon as the next couple nights. I mean, he's at 97 points right now. So, yeah, we could have another year of many, many guys with 100 points. I think we could have as many as maybe 7 or 8 this year. It could be possible. You go down the line with the guys at the top of league scoring, and I mean JT Miller currently has 83 points. He's tied for sixth in league scoring. That's the seventh guy there.
So
Then
James,
Matthews
I
has
have it
79.
I have it up right now. How many players do you think are on pace for 100 points right now?
11.
Bingo. Exactly
Bingo,
11.
because I'm looking at it and we're three-quarter way through the season and Elias Pettersson has 75 points.
He's projected for 98 doing the math.
Hmm.
The Marner, Rantanen, Matthews, Miller, Draisaitl, Nylander, Panarin, Pasternak, McDavid, McKinnon, Kucherov, as of right now, are your players on pace to score 100 points. Sam Reinhart, much like Pedersen, is on pace for 98 as well. Um, yeah, it's another year of a lot of high NHL scores. We did have 11 players last year as well as Jack Hughes and Mitch Marner both finishing the season with 99. Um,
I love seeing it, man. I love not having the Art Ross winner finish with 87 points. Like this is awesome. Like this is something the game needed. I understand that a couple of the things that had to be done to increase power plays, like the like not really being able to do much to an offensive player in front of the net if you're a defenseman. Like I understand that had to happen to increase power plays so we could get here. I understand a few other things had to change, and I don't really like all of them, but for us to get this much offense, it's a lot of fun. It's a ton of fun because you go back to the 90s and like you would see a ton of years like this. And we really, really got in a bit of a dead puck era. Goalies got really good, defensemen got really good, scoring was down. And it's sick having this. It's awesome. Like having like 5, 6 teams that have 100 point scorer or two. That's awesome. Like we love seeing that. I don't know. Is would you prefer seeing less of them?
no, no, this is great. Like I completely agree with you. I think the more scoring, the better. The thing that I haven't really been able to piece together, like, is it the power plays? Is that it? How else is this happening, right? Because like Connor McDavid, obviously 153 points last year. You could attest that as much to Connor McDavid just being Connor McDavid as anything else because he's the best player in the world. He's one of the most talented players ever to play, if not the most skilled player ever. Um, but 1,100 point scores. That's a lot. And you know,
That is a lot.
your 87 point Art Ross winner, like that wasn't from peak dead puck era early 2000s. That was 2016 Jamie Benn. So that like we're not even talking that long ago. Do you have anything in terms of a potential theory, anything like why is this happening? Because I don't really have anything. I don't have a theory. The only thing that I maybe have is two expansion teams since that Jamie Benn season has distilled the league a little bit, but it also feels like every team is better now than ever before. Like even the terrible teams, save for Chicago and San Jose, they still have solid rosters, right? Like Arizona still has some pretty good hockey players on that team. And um yeah, it's weird. I don't know. Do you have a thought?
I mean, just from looking at it, like visually, pure visually, the game is a hell of a lot faster. So I think a lot more goals are scored off the rush than ever. There's probably a stat that'll tell me otherwise, but that's what it feels like just from the eye test. I can't really think of anything other than that, just power plays and more goals scored off the rush, because it isn't just power plays. There's a lot more even strength goals than we've seen in the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years. But it's something that I would have to try really hard to complain about.
Yeah, I
Really.
agree.
I love a good 2-1, 3-2 game, but I also love when we're seeing 7-4. That's sick. That's a lot of fun. I mean, I think playoffs, I like it to tighten up a bit more, as it usually does, but we are seeing more playoff blowouts than usual too. Like you look at that Colorado against Tampa final, both teams had a 7 goal game. So I mean, it does carry over at least a little bit. One last note on point scorers. McDavid's right there now. I really, really thought that. I mean, maybe not thought. I just hoped that Kucherov and McKinnon were going to be able to stave him off. I don't think it's going to happen anymore. I think McDavid's going to end up winning the Art Ross. I think he's going to gap them by like 10 points. He's 8 points behind them right now. That doesn't seem to be a problem considering he was probably 25 points behind them at one point. It's a non-issue for the greatest player on the planet, sadly.
They Yeah, they play Boston tonight. He's on an 11 game point streak. in which in that time he has 26 points
Hmm.
in 11 games, which is well over 2 points a game. Yeah, I don't disagree with you that I would also have to say I think he catches them. Much like you, I am cheering for Nate. Like he's been one of the best players in the world for years now, and he still has never had the individual hardware that, often comes with being one of the best players in the world. Um, I'm sure he would not trade in his Stanley Cup ring for multiple Hart trophies. With that being said, but it'd be nice to see him. Nice to see him get one. I would be very happy because again, he deserves it. He's a phenomenal hockey player. Um, it it feels kind of like, honestly, you know what it feels like? It feels like watching Avengers Infinity War. Like Thanos was always going to win. He was inevitable. Um,
Okay, I see what you mean. At first, I wasn't sure where you're going with
yeah,
that, but yeah, I got you. I got you.
Connor McDavid is inevitable, and I do think he catches them as well.
Oh, yeah. Ugh. It's tough. It's tough. I mean, I thought this was the year that it wasn't going to happen, that he wasn't going to be at the top, but I don't see any way it doesn't happen now.
You know what? I bet
It's
you.
really dumb and maybe a little bit selfish of me to like be disappointed by that, be disappointed by the best player in the league being the best player in the league, but it is the way it is. It's just the way it is.
Well, speaking of scoring, and I don't I don't know for sure when the last time, if it ever has happened. You know what? No, I found it. Okay. So 1992, 93. Pat LaFontaine of the Buffalo Sabres had 148 points. Mario Lemieux of the Pittsburgh Penguins had 160 points. Adam Oates of the Boston Bruins had 142 points. And Teemu Selanne, a rookie Teemu Selanne of the Winnipeg Jets, had 132 points. Pierre Turgeon of the New York Islanders had 132. And Steve Yzerman of the Detroit Red Wings had 137. One, two, three, four, five, six players had 130 points or more.
That's
That it
nuts.
that's the last time that more than two players in one season had over 130 points. So for the first time since 92, 93, we could have three 130 point scores in the NHL this year. Because Kucherov, McKinnon, and McDavid are all almost likely at this point, barring either an unforeseen slump or injury problems, to get there.
Yeah, it's wild to think too, because even a player hitting 120 feels crazy still. I mean, I know we just had McDavid hitting over 150, but over 120 still sounds wild to me after all of those years of low scoring.
Well, I remember Kucherov in 18-19 had 128, and that at the time I was
Insanity.
like, yeah, I was like, oh my God, like that's gonna be like a modern mark. And then not too long after, oh, okay, 153 points. Um, yeah. Anyways, I think that's our NHL for today. I had fun.
I had fun too. I feel like there was so much for us to cover, but we kind of got stuck a little bit.
No, that definitely happened. But at the end of the day, like we haven't done a news pod in a while. Um, if if we really wanted to touch on everything we missed, this would be 3 hours long. And speaking of 3 hours long, James, uh I'm pretty sure we did this last year where we went through every single trade made in the week of the trade deadline. I'd
Oh
be
God.
I'd be down to do that again. That could be our next episode.
Yeah, wasn't that like a 3 hour?
It was long. I remember it being long. We did something similar for free agency as well. And speaking
Oh,
of
I got one more.
one more NHL topic.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
As reported by the Ottawa Sun's Bruce Garriock, the Panthers and Oilers are among the teams eyeing Vladimir Tarasenko. And then elsewhere, The Hurricanes, Bruins, Rangers, and Golden Knights have at least kicked tires on him.
It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense both for those teams to be around Vladimir Tarasenko and for the Ottawa Senators to be shopping him. Like he's a UFA after the season. So Ottawa can pretty easily take that $5 million cap hit and put it into a $2.5 million package for any team to take. He's got a pretty respectable 41 points in 57 games this season. He's got playoff pedigree, 44 goals in 97 career games, one Stanley Cup in a year in which he scored 11 goals in 26 playoff games. Like it's a very alluring, very highly skilled player to add to that group for any team. And I would not be surprised at all to see him be a coveted asset later in the week.
Oh, and there's one other thing I want to touch on just very, very briefly. I know it's another piece of MacKinnon talk, but it's been that kind of year. In all of the MacKinnon talk we've had on this pod, we haven't really talked about his home point streak. He's got 62 points in 30 home games this year. He's at a point in every single home game. It is nuts. This is not stopping at all, seemingly. Knock on wood. And the only player he has to catch left for longest home point streak now because he tied whoever's second. I believe it's Bobby Orr. And the only player he has to catch is Gretzky because Gretzky once did 41 all 41 home games. So that could be an NHL record that MacKinnon could tie. That's pretty wild that a Gretzky record is on the table right now. So, yeah, I'll just leave that there.
Something to watch moving forward for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, keep an eye on that one. It's a fun one, I'd say. And then every time I'm worried that he's not going to, he gets 2 points.
Um, I was gonna say because we were talking about trade deadline and free agency. McKeen's hockey scout Jeremy Plord will join us again for draft coverage this year. We've confirmed that. So big draft special. We'll both have our mock drafts again. That's coming this June as well. That's a good segue into James' state of the Great Canadian Hockey Pod. James and I, as of right now, are both in a spot where it seems like we don't have a ton of restriction to making this a weekly thing again, right? When we both had some work considerations and there was travel involved and there was both of us not being home or one of us not being in a spot we could record the podcast, it was incredibly difficult. We rattled off
Very,
three,
very much so.
yeah, we rattled off 3 February episodes, 2 January episodes. Um, Hopefully this will be released on March 5th. Hopefully this is back to the once a week. So if you've supported us through this, I thank you a lot. The podcast, I think I mentioned last episode, isn't now available on YouTube. The YouTube channel isn't called the Great Canadian Hockey Podcast. It's called Canada Owns Hockey. It's we'll call it our cousin channel. It has the podcast on YouTube. So that is another available platform now. We've added to our Google, Apple, and Spotify for the end of the regular season as we will continue on the road of our show. And we're almost at 50 episodes, man. That's crazy.
I feel like 52 is gonna sound pretty nifty because then you get the like one for I think I said this on the last episode we did.
Yeah,
Because then we'll have
52
like
is,
one for each of a year, even though we've been doing it for over a year. It's a
yeah,
year's worth of episodes.
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I like that too. Okay, so not a lot to report in the junior hockey side of things. Playoffs are getting underway in most of the leagues. The Red Deer Rebels in the WHL have their last home regular season game in 2 weeks from this Saturday against the Edmonton Oil Kings. And then the WHL playoffs start. The CHL playoffs will soon follow. So in the next few weeks, most junior hockey leagues will get their playoffs underway. And, at the end of the day, listen, kids in junior hockey playing big games is the rawest form of hockey passion. And if you live close to any junior hockey team, you're going to get an electrifying game to watch. So I implore anybody in any sort of hockey market, whether it be big or small, to go watch some junior hockey playoffs this year because it's always a treat.
And it's something you can do so easy. It could be as cheap as $10. Sometimes you'll even have things in your community just giving them away for free. Like just go show up, support the teams, have some fun. It's a nice little pastime. Sit there with a buddy and chat. You don't even have to pay complete attention, and you might end up being enthralled. So give it a go. Highly recommend.
So we'll move on. A few questions to answer. By a few, I mean I got two on this list here. One of them is actually just for some reason just about me. Um, we'll we'll get to that after. James, do you have any shape or form of trivia for me today?
Okay, I'm gonna go a little bit off the board with how I do trivia today, and it's something that sounds like it could be so simple, but it's actually kind of difficult. Um, I want you to give me five of the top six scorers in Columbus Blue Jackets history.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And if you give me five in like this is a possible 3 points here, okay, on this trivia. You get 1 point for getting five of the six. You get a second point for getting six of six, and I'll give you a third point if you can do the top five in order.
Okay. Okay. Now, obviously, because this should go without saying, I'm gonna say it anyways. This is just these players' points with Columbus. We're not talking about like Jeff Carter being on this list because he had a cup of tea in
In a
Columbus.
Columbus Blue Jackets
Yeah.
uniform in the regular season.
Okay. Okay. I've got two names down right now. Um, I'll think.
Yeah,
Okay,
tell me
so
what you got. Where are you at with this?
well, I struggled to name any Columbus Blue Jackets like other than Rick Nash pre 2010. Like I know Steve Mason had a Calder winning year there. I know Vinny Prospal ended his career in Columbus. Our my friend, or recent podcast co-host Charlie Black, who is an avid jersey collector, has often shown off his Columbus Blue Jackets Vinny Prospal jersey to me.
Nice. Nice.
But I don't think it's him. Here's what I have in order, and most of these names feel too recent to be correct. Rick Nash in first, then in order, Nick Foligno, Cam Atkinson, Boone Jenner, RJ Umberger, and Brandon Dubinsky.
You
I
know, you started off with names that are on the list but not in the right spot. And
okay,
the recency bias was a good thing. You didn't
okay,
go far enough with the recency bias. That was kind of the problem.
okay. Well, Boone Jenner is active and on this list. Is he higher than
Yeah.
fourth?
He's third.
Okay,
Cam Atkinson is second with
okay.
402 points in 527 or 627 games.
I would have pretty confidently have said Nick Foligno would have been in second, so that's
Yeah,
surprising.
he's fourth. He had 334 in 599.
Okay, so I basically went 1, 4, 2, 3 then with my top four.
Yeah. And then
Okay,
RJ Umberger was on your list.
that was my fifth.
And then Brandon Dubinsky was on your list.
That was my sixth. Yeah.
Yeah, Umberger is seven and Dubinsky is nine.
Okay.
Number six is Zach Werenski,
Oh, interesting.
and who is 31 points ahead of Umberger.
Okay.
And then number five, the Rick Nash teammate you were looking for in your head but couldn't find was David Vaborny.
There is exactly a 0% chance I've watched that guy play a hockey game ever. So I don't feel that bad. Okay. I named four of six. I know I only got one in the right order. Maybe Charlie, our Blue Jackets fan, will be upset with me, but I'm saying that's okay.
Yeah, technically, as per the rules of this question, you got a zero of a possible 3 points.
Okay. That is what it is.
You
It
know
was
what? You
hard.
tried. You put a good effort in.
Okay, so I was struggling how to phrase your trivia question because there's a couple ways I wanted to ask it. Here's what I'll say. We talked about Dougie Hamilton being traded earlier on in the podcast. Dougie
Hmm.
Hamilton's been traded twice. I want you to give me as many details of those two trades as you can. So, team from, team to, and then what the return was. Um, However, there is a third trade in which he was involved in, but was not directly traded in. So his draft pick rights, Boston picked him ninth in 2011. Boston didn't originally have that pick. They acquired that pick in a separate trade. So the question is looking for the two times he was actively traded during his NHL career, but you get a massive kudos bonus point if you can give me what deal his draft pick rights were involved in.
Okay, I'm gonna start there. Um, did the Maple Leafs give the Bruins two first round picks for Phil Kessel, and one of them ended up Sagan and the other one ended up Dougie Hamilton?
That is exactly correct. Yes.
Okay, cool. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because I knew
So,
one of them was Sagan, and then I knew there was another draft pick. I just wasn't sure it was that high, but yeah.
yeah. So in September 2009, the trade was Toronto's 2010 first, their 2011 first, and a 2010 second. The 2010 first ended up being second overall. Boston took Tyler Seguin. The 2011 first ended up being ninth overall. Boston took Dougie Hamilton. And then the 2010 second round pick was used on Jared Knight, who did not play an NHL game.
I weirdly remember Jared Knight, and there's no way it could be for any reason other than franchise mode.
I actually also recognized the name. And when I opened up his Hockey DB page, I was surprised at how little was there because of how much I recognized that name. And I don't recall him being a Team Canada World Junior guy, which would have been the other thing that might have, but might have made me remember him. But that I don't think that's the case. Anyways, so now that you have the weird curveball part of that question out of the way, the other two trades. Now, you know me, you know I'm a draft nerd. This one, another one of these trades does have draft picks involved. If you can give me any indication of what the draft picks were used on in these Dougie Hamilton trades, that's not a requisite for the question to get it right. I'm just looking for, oh, a 2010 first rounder, which obviously isn't the case, but um, that's what I want. If you can give me a player that was picked, I will just be very impressed and love you more.
Okay. So Dougie Hamilton was then traded after a little bit of time from the Boston Bruins to the Calgary Flames. I want to say it was for two good draft picks and a low draft pick. There were three draft picks, right?
There were three draft picks. I
Is it
will,
a first, a second, and a third, or is it a two first and a third?
it was a first and two seconds.
Oh. Um, and was one of the was the first rounder Dylan Dubé?
No, because remember it was Boston to Calgary. So Boston would have
Oh
been
yeah.
making the
Oh, okay, so
selection.
Boston got it. Oh, oh, oh. It's one of um is it Zachary Senyshyn?
That is who it is. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome. That's a great pull. Don't
yeah.
forget, everybody listening that is a hockey fan, that the Boston Bruins in the first round of the 2015 NHL draft had a chance to cement their late 2010s, early 2020s dynasty by selecting Matthew Barzal, Kyle Connor, Thomas Chabot, Joel Eriksson Ek, Brock Besser, Sebastian Aho, Kirill Kaprizov, and a number of other star players, and instead they selected Jakub Zaboral 13th, Jake DeBrusk 14th, and Zach Senyshyn 15th. Zach Senyshyn has played 16 NHL games to this point. Zaboral 76. Jake DeBrusk is Jake DeBrusk. I like him, but
To be
Boston,
fair, I thought Jakub Zboril was going to be nasty.
I didn't see it. I remember not seeing it. To me,
Okay.
the frustrating part to me, and frustrating like the part that I think was dumb, was the fact that this 2015 draft was transparently an excellent draft. Like, why not trade down with one of your three consecutive first rounders? Zach Senyshyn was ranked in the 40s. You
Yeah.
absolutely did not have to use a 15th overall pick on him. Um, Anyways, I digress. The other two players were both played in the NHL. Jeremy Lauzon and Jacob Forsbacka Karlsson were the two seconds that
Oh,
Boston
I
took
knew
that year.
JFK was one of them. I knew
Okay.
that. Yeah, I definitely knew that.
So Hamilton was traded once more in his career
Yeah.
to date. What was the trade?
I have pieces of this one and like they're all floating around in my head. So he went, Dougie Hamilton and the rights to Adam Fox went to the Carolina Hurricanes in exchange for Elias Lindholm and Noah Hannafin.
You're
There's a draft pick and another player in there, I think.
you're so close. There isn't a draft pick in there. It's a straight up five-player deal. You got the Carolina to Calgary correct. Elias Lindholm and Noah Hannafin. Dougie Hamilton and Adam Fox. I didn't know if you were going to get Fox, but yes, Dougie Hamilton and Adam Fox went from Calgary to Carolina. They were joined by Michael Furland.
Oh, I knew Michael Furlan went to the Hurricanes.
He had 1 year in Carolina. He was a pending UFA, and then he signed in Vancouver. And then concussions kind of messed up the rest of his career from
You know,
there.
if that was like a 5 points criteria kind of thing, I think I got like 3.5.
You got four of the five pieces.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But like I got the bonus, the Kessel one. And then I'd say if there were like 2 points available on each of those ones, I think like I got close, but not quite there.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I guess over the last few episodes and last couple months, really, we did find out it's technically the Great Canadian Hockey Podcast without a couple great games to play. But don't you agree that it's that much more fun? And I don't know, the episode just feels more complete when we do play a game or two.
Well, and I have friends of mine that are regular listeners that will often text me and say like that they did or didn't get the trivia question right. So the fact that I do have people that are like, "Oh yeah, I play along with the trivia," that's what's motivated me more than anything to indeed keep it going. And yeah, and obviously you and I, you know, the foundation of our friendship is hockey trivia, so we just have to,
It's true.
yeah, we just have to keep doing it. So there was two Q&A submissions. I'll just rattle off the first one.
Yeah, I
What
guess
would,
this one clearly indicates that you're the favorite. But
well, to this one person that submitted at least, um, what would Aiden's reaction be to a Canucks Stanley Cup win?
can I
I
stop you before you answer?
To do what?
Um, to say that no matter what you say, you don't know.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
yeah, you have no idea.
The only frame of reference I have to being that happy over a sporting event would probably be Portugal winning the European Championship in 2016. I was like crying. Now, I was 13, mind you, but I still think me at 21 years old would be in tears if the Canucks won the cup this year. Like I truly believe that. That would be unreal. And I'm not saying I think it's going to happen, but I'm definitely saying I'm going to be disappointed when it doesn't. um, Next question, James. I had time to think about this because I typed it into this rundown. This person wants us to give our three most exciting hockey games you can remember from any level, not necessarily your favorite games, but the best in terms of action, stakes, or storylines. So, for instance, James, I think when it says not necessarily your favorite games, it is basically saying, like, oh, not Colorado winning the cup because that was a 2-0 game. So, as much as that might be your favorite because Colorado won the cup, that isn't encompassed in this question. It's just most exciting hockey games you can remember. Now, I have my three.
I've already got three as well.
Okay. You can go first. None of mine are NHL games. And, that's might be my World Junior and International Hockey bias as well. But You start off because I have a feeling yours will be more NHL than mine.
So, in no particular order whatsoever, I have the conference finals game between the Blackhawks and the Kings, in which Patrick Kane scored an overtime winner and he did the heartbreaker celebration. Those Kings Blackhawks games were just always that awesome. Like, these teams were better than every other team in the league, no matter what. Like, a Blackhawks Kings series at that time was pretty much the cup final before the cup final. Like, whoever won that series was winning the cup. They were that good, and you could just feel the intensity in the broadcast. Everyone in the arena and the commentators were so dialed into it because you could just feel the energy from it. It was insane. Another one for me, and I don't know why this one jumped to mind, but I just remember being blown away by the intensity and the excitement in this game. And my roommate at the time and I just being like, whoa, this is insane. And I had actually stepped out for 10 minutes to get food and then came back and it was still going on and still that crazy. This is the game between the San Jose Sharks and the Vegas Golden Knights, in which Joe Pavelski was taken down at the face-off dot. And there was a 5-minute major called, and the Sharks scored, I believe, 3 goals on that 5 minute, 4 goals on that 5-minute power play. And yeah, it was absolute insanity. Just absolute insanity. I remember watching that game and thinking I haven't been this blown away or excited by a game in a while. Like, it had been a bit. And then next after that, I go back to being 12 years old. And this probably is one of Aiden's as well. And that is Exhale, British Columbia. That's Alex Burrows scoring game 7 overtime against the Blackhawks in 2011, Chicago first round. So, yeah, that one's always going to give me chills. That one's always going to stick right in my heart because I was in grade 7. I was in elementary school, and like the Canucks went up 3-0 in that series. And then the Hawks won the next 3, and everyone went, "Oh, they're gonna lose, they're gonna lose." And that was the couple years that I fell in love with hockey the most, where like it really set up the rest of my life being a complete hockey nerd. And I just remember watching that game on my couch. And I'll never forget how hard I jumped off that seat. It was insane. And you could just feel the excitement in the city for days after that. It was just nuts.
I remember that game very fondly because my dad is not really an outwardly emotional person. Like he keeps his emotions in check, right? Like nothing gets him too angry or upset. Like he when something's really happy, he does a good job at like, he's happy about it, but he's not going to go ecstatic, right? Um, that I remember definitely at the time was like the most excited I ever saw him. And I would have been like 8 years old at that point. So that's my most fond memory from that was just like how like my dad, again, literally the way he was jumping off the couch. Um, I have 3 Team Canada games, and again, it was the World Juniors that got me into hockey. It's my favorite hockey. I love best on best. I love the Olympics, so this kind of was inevitable. So I will, again, not really in order. I'll go oldest to newest. This game was very interesting for a lot of reasons. I look at this game and Canada's not the next game at the 2010 Olympics, but 2 games after. These 2 hockey games, James, I in my head consider the death of the hybrid goaltender. The
Hmm.
second one was Canada and Russia's 2010 quarterfinal in the Olympics. Canada won 7-3. They obliterated hybrid goaltender Yevgeny Nabokov. They had 6 goals past him in the first 24 minutes or so of that game. For that reason, it actually wasn't an exciting 60-minute hockey game, so that's not the one on the list. The other one was Ryan Miller versus Martin Brodeur from the preliminary round of the 2010 Olympics. The United States beat Canada 5-3 in group play. Marty Brodeur was terrible. He was at fault for the loss unequivocally. Roberto Luongo went in, and Canada has never had a hybrid goaltender play for the national team again after that. That was the end of the hybrid goalie. And that game specifically, Canada US, the Americans opened the scoring early. Canada tied it. The US went up 2-1. Canada tied it again 2-2. The Americans went up 4-2, and it was 4-2 for a while. Canada was pouring on pressure. Eventually, Crosby scored with under 4 minutes left to make it 4-3. And then that last 3.5 minutes of hockey was exhilarating, like just frantic chances. You had some of the best players of that era on the ice trying to score for Canada, like a Ginla, Pronger on the back end, Doughty, Keith, Weber all got out there.
Heatley.
Obvious. Heatley was a beast in the preliminary round of that tournament, and then he disappeared after that. But it's not here nor there. He did score in that game.
Well, that may or
Um,
may not be because he's rumored to have closed down the Roxy 27 nights in a row.
my God. Um,
You
and
didn't know
then
that?
no, I did not know that. That seems in character based on what I've heard about Danny Heatley, though. Um,
It's an all-star, man.
yeah, a 50 goal score. Can't take that away from him.
And 07 and 06.
Yeah, 2 years in a row he was.
Yeah.
Um, Ryan Kessler scored one of the most unreal empty net goals I have ever seen late in the third period to make it 5-3 and win it for the States. Obviously, the Americans winning was not the best part of that game, but it did make the gold medal game feel all the more special when Canada beat them. My other one, I'm sure this has come up on this podcast, the 2012 World Junior Hockey Championship semifinal between Canada and Russia. Russia had Andrei Vasilevsky, who was just an absolute beast, did not let in a thing all tournament. He was just unbelievable. Russia had Kuznetsov and Kucherov on that forward core, and Russia went up 6-1 on Canada in the third period. The Canadians managed to score 4 goals on Vasilevsky and chase him. Sergei Makarov comes in
Andre.
on Andrei Makarov comes in, stands on his head to keep Canada out. Russia wins that 6-5. But that third period was just unbelievable to watch. The last one, I'm going to go the 2020 World Junior Gold Medal game between Canada and Russia. Russia up 3-1 in the third period. McMichael scores, Barrett Hayton scores, and then Akil Thomas scores. Canada wins 4-3 in regulation. That Barrett Hayton goal, man, after he had barely played in that game. His shoulder looked like it was in pieces, and he still just absolutely wired in the time goal on the power play. That was unreal. And yeah, those are my answers that I thought of when I was writing that today. And yeah, like you said, like there's so many playoff games to choose as well. But I just, I've been such a big let's go Canada guy forever that it's hard for me not to gravitate towards that.
That's totally fair. And you brought up the Barrett Hayton thing, and man, he was a World Junior player you love to cheer for. The guy just left it all out there at every moment.
You know
Oh,
what? His first year, I really did not like what I saw.
really?
2019 in Vancouver, like he ended with like 4 assists in 5 games. He didn't score. He didn't look engaged, right? And I think that was a big thing when he went into that camp. Like he was like, it's like you said, like uh, there is nothing that's going to stop me from playing the best hockey that I can play and lifting this trophy as the captain. And that's what he did.
Gotta love it, man. Well, I think that's all we got for today's episode. And I feel like we accomplished a lot after all of those episodes where we have a guest or I'm not here, and feels like we managed to cover a lot. And I hope this is something we can keep giving you guys over the next few weeks at least. So I want to thank you all for listening on behalf of me and Aiden, and we will see you in the next one. Let's roll that outro. Thanks, guys.